Thanks everybody for joining us today. We're so glad you could come. Today we're going to be talking about food security on campus. This is part 2 of our series on that topic, and we'll be featuring Bunker Hill Community College and FoodLink's community-focused partnership. This webinar is the second in a new Find series tackling the growing issue of food insecurity on college campuses. My name is Tania Taranovski. I'm the Director of Programs at Farm to Institution, or FINE. I'm going to be moderating today's webinar, and I'm really happy to have you all joining us. Also helping out on today's webinar is FINE's Communications Manager, Sarah Lyman. Sarah, hi, thanks. She's going to be helping out in the chat. And if you have any technical difficulties or questions, you can check in with her. And she'll also be sharing links and any other helpful resources in the chat. If you also want to take a moment to introduce yourselves, that would be great. We'd love to hear from you if you want to share your name, your organization, and where you work on, if you're working on food security, what your interest in that topic is. As we get started, here's a brief outline for what we're going to be doing today. After a short introduction, I'm going to hand things over to our speakers, Molly Hansen from Bunker Hill Community College and Elise Springuel from FoodLink. We'll make sure that we leave time for questions at the end of the webinar, and then we'll leave you with a few resources and you'll get a link to a survey. We'd really appreciate it if you would just take a moment to answer just a couple of questions to help improve our webinar series and other programming. As we get started, I just want to, I know everybody's pretty familiar with Zoom at this point, but just remind you about the chat and the Q&A, and also that we are recording today's webinar. And the webinar recording will be available on FINE's YouTube channel within a couple of days, so you can feel free to share it there or check back if there's anything that you missed. We're going to be using chat to introduce ourselves, to share links, as I said, and you can feel free to check in with other participants in the webinar there. And you can also use the Q&A to share questions that you have for our speakers anytime through the webinar and also during our Q&A section. As I said, if you're just joining us, we'd love to hear from you as well. So add your name, your organization, and if you'd like, how you're working to address food security. All right. Before I introduce our speakers, I just want to tell you a little bit about Farm to Institution New England, or FINE. We are a cross-sector network backbone organization working to mobilize the power of institutions to transform our food system. We are hoping to bring more good food, sustainable, just, equitable food into K-12 schools, colleges and universities, hospitals, correctional facilities, and we're also starting a new initiative with partners in the early childcare education sector. So for more information about FINE, all the different kinds of programs and resources that we can offer you in your work, please visit our website, www.farmtoinstitution.org. As part of our work with the campus sector, FINE supports the work of the New England Farm and City Campus Network, which is bringing the webinar to you today. The network is a community of higher education and food system stakeholders who are connecting, sharing, and collaborating to develop transparent regional food systems, to develop regional supply chains, educate campus communities about regional food systems, and continue to help us with our work. The webinars like the one today are just one of the ways that we work with the network and that we share information and convene people around key issues in our food system. As most of you are probably aware, food insecurity is a rising concern, but especially on college campus, and colleges are tackling it through a number of different strategies. Today's speakers are going to be talking about how they're working to address hunger and food insecurity in their communities and how they are partnering on those efforts. And before I hand things over to them, I would like to say a special thank you to Momoko Hiroshi. Momoko worked at FINE over the summer as a program associate, and she's returned back to her graduate studies at Boston University now. But she was the one who was really instrumental in helping us develop our work in food insecurity on campuses and bringing these webinars to you. And I'd also like to thank our Pharmacy to Campus Network Steering Committee for their help and support of these efforts. So today I'm really pleased to welcome Molly Hansen from Bunker Hill Community College. Molly's the Senior Special Programs Coordinator, and in this role, she heads up the Dish Food Pantry on campus, among other things. Bunker Hill Community College has shown a lot of leadership in addressing student needs to help ensure students have success in school, and we're really grateful to Molly for joining us to share more about this important work that she's doing. And I'm also really pleased to have Elise Springuel joining us, who she leads, Food Link's operations team and community partnerships. Elise has worked in many roles in the food system. She's worked on farms, in restaurants, farmers markets, a community grocery, and she's bringing this breadth of experience to her work to alleviate hunger, end food waste, and help the environment. So we have two really fantastic speakers, and now I'm happy to turn things over to our first, Molly Hansen. Molly?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon. So to get us started, I am just going to quickly share here. Can everyone see? Yes? Okay, excellent, great. So as Tania said, my name is Molly Hansen. I run the food pantry at Bunker Hill Community College in Boston. And to get us started, I kind of wanted to just give a quick overview of who our students are here at Bunker Hill. So like many community colleges, our student population is very diverse. It's not your typical 18-year-old coming out of high school, maybe still living at home or receiving support from parents. It's a lot of students who are older. Our average age is 26. And a lot of students who are working full or multiple part-time jobs and have just a lot of responsibilities in the home. And school may be something that they are really passionate about, but it's something they have to work really hard to achieve and to go. So we have about 19,000 students, both online and in person. So we're a very big, far-reaching institution, which is great. And as I said, 65% are part-time, and that's really reflective of the fact that many of our students have a lot of stuff going on. Because of that, we unfortunately also have a lot of students who struggle with food and other basic needs insecurity. And so I wanted to give an overview of where the inspiration for that came from. So as you heard, Bunker Hill has been a leader in this type of advocacy work for many years. Our president has spoken in many different conferences. She's even testified in Congress. She's been an incredible advocate. And in starting a food pantry, the committee that was tasked with this was very focused on how can we make this the best and most efficient and most helpful food pantry for our students. And so over the course of a year and a half, this committee thought through pretty much every detail, where will we get the food, what process will we go through for students to sign up and all that sort of stuff. And then they hired me in spring 2019. And so then I started the position and had this long list of ideas. And then I kind of was able to, make it work and put some into action and create our food pantry. So the picture on the left is a picture of our food pantry when it was brand new. So the food pantry actually was constructed to be the food pantry. We didn't repurpose another space. This area used to be an overhang, like outside, but they enclosed it and gave us some beautiful windows and a really nice space for us to use. And so in designing this space that you see, this blank canvas, our committee drew from inspiration from things like Whole Foods, which you'll see in the picture on the right. So because our students have so much going on and we suspected that the need was so great, we wanted the pantry to be as efficient and dignified and stigma-free as possible. And so in order to do that, we really took a deep look at how we're going to offer our services. And so pre-pandemic, we were open, daily business hours. We had a great student staff who would run the pantry, welcome students, pack the orders, and do all that sort of stuff. But since the pandemic, and I'll talk about this in a later slide, we've had to shift kind of to a more no contact model. But at the essence, a student food pantry is a for students by students initiative. We really are here for the students and really listen and value their feedback, and are so happy to be able to have some of them work with us. So, as I said, we wanted our food pantry to have a really easy and efficient way for students to pick which items they wanted. We didn't want students to have to wait in line or, take hours out of their day to come to the food pantry. We wanted it to be really easy. So we found this software called Smart Choice. And so how the software works is that all of our inventory is uploaded to this website, and we're able to, on the back end, I'm able to assign point values to each item, as well as little descriptions and things like that. So you'll see kind of on the right hand side, pasta sauce is 2 points, and then penne pasta and spaghetti are 1 point each. And students have 30 points per month to shop. And we use the language shop in the pantry to really destigmatize the experience. So it's kind of just like you're shopping, like on Amazon or on Peapod or something. You're just going through and shopping and selecting your items. And so everything that we have is online. And so students are able to, take their time and figure out what they want. And not have to be rushed by someone behind them in line or anything like that. And the most important part is that they can choose the items that's best for them and their family. So they're not just getting kind of a prepackaged box. It's items that they specifically chose for themselves. So currently, we are really excited to being able to offer free deliveries to our students. In the picture that you see on the right-hand side, you'll see actually Chromebooks on that cart. And the reason I put that picture too is to kind of just I guess give an overview of like how the food pantry has evolved over the course of the past 2.5 years. We've kind of become more of a basic needs place. I also run the textbook assistance program and now the Chromebook rental program. And so it's really been great to kind of like use the resources that we have and help students more. But anyways, so from May 2020 to present, we've been doing free deliveries of up to 60 students a week, about 200 a month, kind of depending of course upon the month and the holidays and all that sort of stuff. And so these deliveries are completely free, and they are within 10 miles of campus. So the radius is really wide. Most of our students definitely live within 10 miles of campus. And then when we moved back onto campus in 2021, we've had a few more students come in for classes. We're now able to offer those on-campus pickups as well. So just to make it a little easier for the student if they want their order like sooner. And again, that focus on thoughtfulness, dignity, and respect for students and their family. That's a really leading component of everything that we do. And now I'm really excited to talk about the reason we're all here, which is our partnership with FoodLink. So actually, Bunker Hill's relationship with FoodLink goes back to 2012. And I believe I saw Kathleen O'Neill on this call, actually. So Kathleen is our single stop director. So Kathleen, if you want to add anything via chat, or if you can unmute later on, you're more than welcome to add on. But their partnership began in 2012, and how that kind of worked was that we were the single stop office, which used to be kind of like the main place where students were able to receive food and other basic needs assistance items. They were receiving bread and produce and a bunch of other great stuff from FoodLink, and they would have that available in their office for not only students but also staff. And that really kind of helped start the conversation around food insecurity and the amazing community partners that were available to help. And so it's been a robust partnership ever since. And once the food pantry opened, we kind of moved the food component of a single stops operation over to the food pantry. And so from September 2019 to 2020, when the pandemic started, we were receiving biweekly donations of fresh bread and produce. So we would have an awesome volunteer come twice a week and drop off a ton of great bread, bagels, all this really great stuff. And we would just put it out on the table so students would come in, pick up their order, and then also be able to kind of shop around our kind of take what you can use table. So they could get some bread, a banana, some oranges maybe, and we would, put it out, and it would be gone by the end of the day. So it was very popular. But of course, with the pandemic, we really had to rethink that model. So because a lot of food links, the food that they provide is rescued, it's typically, especially with the produce and the bread, it's typically towards the end of its life cycle. So it doesn't keep for very long, which is fine if you're offering it, the day of, and students take it right home and eat it. But as I showed you before, our ordering system, students place orders up to 3 weeks ahead of time. And so it's really hard to kind of like manage that inventory. But luckily, they also do a ton of great non-perishable stuff too. So we were just able to shift over to those types of items. So you'll see this picture on the screen here. These are all items that we received from FoodLink, and they range from dessert mix and granola bars to spices and teas and all sorts of really cool stuff that we typically don't get donated from places like the food bank or other organizations. They're really been great to kind of fill the gap with some of our cool specialty items. And so this is just another example of stuff that they've been able to offer. So how we distribute this is we have what's called a dish mystery box, and students can select that they would like a mystery item. And so then I go through and am able to give them one of these really cool items. And one of the best things is that a lot of them are really like desirable stuff. Like it's as you can see, it's cookie mix, it's Triscuits, pancake mix, stuff that students may not be expecting, but are surprised and excited when they see it in their bag. And on the right hand side, you see pumpkin bagels. That was back when we were able to do, in-person produce. And I remember we would get stuff like this in, and I put it up on our Instagram story and say, we have pumpkin bagels, or we have all this great stuff. And students would come and take it, and it'd be gone by the end of the day. So it's very cool, popular stuff. And over the course of these 2.5 years, they've just been like instrumental in helping us being able to not only stay open, but also keep our level of inventory. Honestly, we've gone above what we were offering before, because we're able to do so much more now that we have, with the storage. Once we moved to the delivery model, we were able to kind of add more storage to our space and to have more products. So it's great. So I wanted to end on this slide. This is my contact information. There's Charlie the bulldog, who's our mascot, with a red basket full of dish items. And so yeah, if you have any questions on anything, I'd be more than happy. I'm sure at the end we'll have time to. But our food pantry is totally open if anyone has questions about like how we set things up, or how it's utilized. And yeah, and with that, I will pass it over to Elise, who is our food link gal.
Great. Thank you, Molly. It's so great to get to share this screen with you. Let me switch over to my slides. All right, are we seeing those? Awesome, great. Well, thank you to Tania for having us, and for hosting this webinar on such an important topic. Food insecurity on college campuses is unfortunately something that is way too high and concerning, but we're really glad to be able to partner with Bunker Hill Community College to do something about it. So again, my name is Elise Springuel, and I'm the Director of Operations and Community Partnerships at FoodLink. FoodLink, let me get to the right screen so I can advance those slides. So FoodLink is a food rescue organization. And what that means is we're working to get excess food to folks who need it. And for us, what that looks like is working with grocery stores, wholesalers, and farms to get their excess product. So product that is still really quite good. Normally it's maybe overstock, something that's getting close to code date, maybe something with a little bit of bumps or bruises, but still perfectly wonderful to eat, perfectly nutritious. And we redistribute that to nonprofits and community organizations throughout Eastern Massachusetts who are serving food insecure folks. We do this because we envision a world without waste in which everyone has enough. We're really kind of disturbed by this idea that there's food waste while there is so much hunger. So we're working to do something about that. We really have this dual mission. So on one hand, we're talking about sustainability and food waste. In this country, 40% of what we produce is wasted, and it happens at every level of our food system. So from the farms to your homes. There's this great pie chart here that gives a little bit of a breakdown of where it's happening. But for us, we're really focused on that grocery and distribution, that little green section, a little bit with manufacturers and institutions as well, and some with farms. But you can see here that quite a bit of it happens in our homes as well. So we like to believe that we're getting to do a little bit of passive education on that, because we do work with 250 volunteers every year who do this work, and most of them report eating differently at home. If food waste was its own country, it would be the third largest producer of greenhouse gases. This is because when food goes to a landfill, it often creates methane, which is a highly dangerous greenhouse gas. So we're really working to try to keep food out of landfills. Our primary goal is to redistribute food to nonprofits who can use it. Places like Bunker Hill Community College and many of our other partners that I'll talk a little bit more about. But we also do work to ensure that if we can't redistribute the food, doesn't meet our standards because we want to send out good food. We work to either get it to animals for consumption or to a composter to be turned into dirt. The other part of our mission, of course, is the social justice, food justice component of it. Currently in Massachusetts, about 1 in 10 people are experiencing food insecurity, which is much too high of a number, and is a really disturbing number given how much food goes to waste. Food insecurity, as folks on this webinar likely know, is a lack of access to consistent food for a healthy lifestyle, and has many different causes. We as an organization don't necessarily directly serve food insecure populations. We're working with agencies serving those, and that's really our sweet spot. And I think is part of what makes us work well, as I will explain more about. So our model is really around getting this excess food and getting it to folks. We are somewhere between what's called a just-in-time food rescue, where we get food directly from the source and then take it directly to an agency, and a food banking model, which means it stops in a central location in between. So we do a little bit of both. And most of this work is done by volunteers. So we have a staff of about 10, 9 full-time, 1 part-time, that supports the work of around 250 regular volunteers who are doing our food rescue. So it's a fairly large community moving this food around. And what it tends to look like is at our grocery store partners, we'll have a team of volunteers show up for a regular shift. We have a regular schedule with them. They show up at the loading dock. The store has set aside donations, and then our volunteers take those donations, sort through the food. Some of it, by the time we get it, will be compost because it might have been put aside the evening before, maybe was a little bit on edge anyways. So we're sorting through to make sure that the food feels good to give out, that it is high quality, and it's going to be supporting dignity. And then we create custom boxes for the various deliveries directly from that location. It could be places like, for example, on here I have Mystic Community Market, which is a food pantry, or Housing Families Inc., which is a variety of support systems for families transitioning out of homelessness. And so some of those deliveries go right away to those agencies, and some come back to our hub. So we moved into our hub in March of this year, and it's a building designed to help support our food rescue. We have 300 square feet of cold storage, as well as plenty of dry storage and a sorting area. We're able to repack bulk food into smaller containers that better suit the needs of families as opposed to institutions. And so it lets us rescue more food, and it also lets us do some last minute donations to agencies. So many of the places we're working with may not have storage for the amount of food that they can distribute that day. Dish thankfully does have more storage, and during the pandemic, many agencies kind of gained storage because they don't have forward facing institutions anymore. But we are able to hold donations to do deliveries right before distribution, meaning our agencies can give out more food. Last year, we rescued 1.2 million pounds of food. This was twice as much food as we had rescued in 2019. And this year we're on track to do, we thought it was going to be another 1.2 million. It's looking closer to 1.3 or 1.4 million. But this year we decided not to push the growth as much and focus on settling into our new building. But doubling in 2020 was a bit of a surprise for us, and it was very much a result of pandemic operations. There was inefficiencies in the food system, which made food more available, but it was really done as a response to the fact that food insecurity rates rose so quickly. And it takes a village to do this work. So we are, yes, rescuing that food, but it's really about our food donors and our community partners. Without them, it wouldn't make any sense to rescue it. So we worked with over 100 food donors last year and over 100 community partners to distribute the food. Our food through our community partners reached about 80,000 individuals in 28 communities throughout Eastern Massachusetts. And again, we did this through nearly 10,000 hours of volunteer help, which was really fantastic. As I've mentioned, our community partners are what makes this. We work with a variety of different kinds of agencies, food pantries, homeless shelters, after school programs. You can see a whole comprehensive list here. And over the years, one of the things we've discovered works really well is situating food where folks are for other support services or would be anyways. So you're going to see on this list places like low-income housing facilities. We do partner with a number of low-income housing facilities to maintain or either permanent or pop-up pantries in the facility. So they might have a room that becomes dedicated as a food pantry, or have residents who set up a food pantry each week at the housing facility. And to me, this is a model of a great way to really meet folks where they are at, because it means that folks don't have to travel far. It is a reduced stigma because it's in their home, and it's kind of expected that, like, if it's in your community, that other members of your community are also taking advantage of it. And it lets us also ensure that the right food makes it to the right people because it's so close. These pantries are often organized by a staff member at the housing facility or a resident, and they give us a lot of direct feedback on what kinds of food that community needs. Are there certain dietary restrictions? Are there certain kinds of cultures represented? Are there certain kinds of time needs? Like, is prepared foods that you can heat and eat going to go over better? Or is it a lot of really large families and they want huge bags of rice? So we work really closely with our recipient agencies to understand that and ensure that they're getting the right sets of food. You can look at college campuses as a really similar example. At a college campus, it's a quick kind of, you were decreasing the distance that folks have to move and decreasing the distance from food assistance, which is very important because there are a lot of folks who are food insecure who may not be able to access resources due to time restrictions, transportation, and also a lot of stigma around food insecurity. So we really are always looking to increase our partnerships that meet people where they already live or congregate or would go for other services. You'll see things like senior centers on there for a similar reason, refugee support services, vocational programs, etc. So Molly already mentioned quite a bit of how FoodLink has worked with Bunker Hill over the years, and I want to stress how important this partnership has been for us as well. So Bunker Hill was actually one of our first partners. FoodLink started in 2012, and we started, I think I saw Julie Kremer, who is one of our co-founders, on here as well. We've got all sorts of origin stories going on. But we started in 2012 when our two co-founders were picking up a bread and pastry donation for an event at the local high school. And they started talking to the cafe and discovered that if the food wasn't going to be donated, it would have ended up in the trash. And that every other night that week, there had been waste and food was ending up in the trash. And they knew something better had to happen with that food. So they first went to a housing facility in the area and started donating food there. Quickly after, we began working with places like Trader Joe's as well, because they also indicated that they had excess food and were interested in donating it, but couldn't find a place for it. And so we've discovered this whole of there were places interested in donating food, and there were plenty of folks who needed it, but the logistics of getting it from one place to another was really the challenge. And so I think maybe our second agency, if not quite the second, not long after, was the single stop program at Bunker Hill Community College. And it was really that Kathleen O'Neill was in many ways ready for that food. It was a program that was also already supporting students, already trying to be this single stop where students could come for a variety of resources. And they were able to add food to that list of potential resources. It wasn't a huge amount. It was a manageable amount that could move quickly. They were offered it to staff as well, so it moved off the shelves. But it was a rapid thing that we were able to just kind of get going, try out, but it had dedicated folks to it. As Molly mentioned, over time, having this presence on the campus and having that the food there really showed the community how necessary it was, how needed it was. And they were able to expand the programming and create this wonderful dedicated space, dedicated staff position to the pantry. Over time, our relationship with them has changed as well. So we started with really kind of these bread and pastries, expanded to produce. I think there was prep foods at some points. So there could be grab and go meals for students. And then we began working with the pantry, and the pantry, we, as Molly mentioned, started with doing the bread and produce that were great add-ons to the orders that folks would do. And then when the pandemic hit, that no longer made sense. So we figured out different ways of working together. And it's one of my favorite parts of our relationship with Bunker Hill is that we've really had kind of 3 distinct chapters of relationship with them. And it's all about meeting the needs of the kinds of food that they need at the moment. One of the things we've discovered over our work is that when we work with grocery stores and wholesalers, we get a variety of product, and it's really interesting. But we need to be able to split it up between different agencies and get from multiple sources to best serve the needs of both ends. Our grocery stores want us to take all the food, and these agencies need a specific set of things. So by having this large source, putting it through kind of our little bottleneck, and then going to all these different agencies, we're able to kind of even out the emergency food system in that way and ensure that the right food gets to the right places. And Bunker Hill has been an example of how we've gotten to do that consistently over the years. So as I mentioned, we work with over 100 community partners, and right now Bunker Hill is actually the only college we're working with. We've had other colleges approach us at different points in time to try to start programs, and many of them have been hard to get off the ground for a variety of different reasons. So I want to highlight a little bit of what we've experienced at Bunker Hill as a really powerful, successful part of the partnership, and also what we've experienced at other places that make for good partnerships. I really think that this model of kind of embedded food pantries in places that folks already would be is such an important model of ensuring increasing food access and food security in really dignified ways. And those tend to work best when there is some kind of way to create some dedicated volunteers or staffing for the position, that it's not simply an add-on, but it fits well into an existing program or it becomes its own program. I think one of the things that I noted over time with Bunker Hill is that one single stop, there was so much going on there, and it took it did take extra work on the part of the staff to ensure that food would happen or food would get there and be distributed, but it fit in the model. It fit in the overall spirit of the work there. And then when they start dish, that even more so, this is the dedicated effort of the program, is to be a food pantry. And by acknowledging that importance and that really kind of putting resources to it, it makes it sustainable in the long run. Some of the other places that we've tried to work with over time, it's been students who reach out, and students can be great impetuses to start food pantries. But if there isn't staffing or administrative support, that turnover of students can often kind of interrupt that process and mean it doesn't continue over time. Similarly, we've had ones that didn't necessarily have anyone dedicated to it. It was just like, this is a great idea. We're going to put a pantry in the back of student services. And again, if there's not someone that it falls under, it tends to not be maintained. So this model of finding a place where it fits already or staffing it really makes a difference. I also loved how Bunker Hill evolved over time, that it did start small and it proved a bigger point. And I think that that's there's nothing to say you have to start a whole food pantry all at once. If you just get a little bread and pastries on campus, all of a sudden people start taking them and appreciating them. You get an argument right there that this is a necessity. As we work with partners, there's a couple of things that we find as really important pieces, both on our end and on their end of working with clients. So first off, at FoodLink, we know that our expertise is really around distributing food to partners and not to people. This is a simpler thing for us because we're working with larger amounts of food. When we start to think of too small of pieces like individuals, it can gum up our process, versus if we're thinking about community size and institution size, it works better. But for that to work, we have to rely on feedback from our partners about how the food is going over for their clients. So our best partners are ones that are deeply connected to their communities and are in regular conversation with folks of what they need. You know, it kind of feels funny in ways, thinking about the desserts and the dessert mixes that we set into place when we really want to focus on healthy food. But a dessert mix, like a cake mix, can make a huge difference for someone. Can you imagine being a college student that's invited to a potluck and you don't necessarily have funds to go pay for something or buy something to bring to the potluck, but then you have a cake mix in your pantry from the Dish Food Pantry that you can make a cake and bring to that potluck. So those little bits of dignity can actually make a huge difference. And we know that because we hear it from our partners and they're listening to their clients about what are some of the things you might overlook when you're just focused on how to meet need. So we really believe in creating this space for feedback. We know we're doing partnerships well with our agencies when they tell us no about something or ask for specific things. And we hope that our agencies are hearing similar things from their clients as well. We also know that food security programs work best and are best when they focus on dignity. One of the things that I really always appreciate going to Dish or hearing from Molly of the work that they're doing is how much they work to create an environment that felt like a supermarket, and the emphasis on choice. Being a food rescue organization, sometimes it's really hard for us to fit into choice pantries because we don't exactly know what we're getting. But we know how important that choice factor is, and the creativity of how you do both, I think, enhances dignity, where there is that set of things that will be on the shelf that you can ensure folks have, that you can create an ordering system around. And then there's all the fun add-ons, the fresh produce or the bread or the granola bars that feel like a bonus when you show up. I mean, like, I love going grocery shopping and seeing something interesting I've never gotten to try before. And I think that everyone should be able to have similar experiences. So creating an environment that's focused on dignity and focused on kind of recreating or enhancing those kinds of experiences that folks have maybe in supermarkets or in other ways of getting food, I think is a really important part of this. So that is what I have. I guess we can open up for questions. I've put some contact information on this slide, the food link contact info, as well as myself and our social media. I'd be happy to chat with folks about what it has looked like for us to create some of these partnerships over time, what food rescue is like. It's a wonderful growing field, and there's lots of room in food rescue. So be curious to chat with colleges as well about if you're looking at the other end of reducing your food waste on campus. That's also a very interesting thing that we didn't get to cover here today, but would be very curious to talk to you about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elise and Molly. Really appreciate you sharing both about your work individually, but also just how important and effective this partnership has been. And I think that at Fine, we've been thinking about for many years about institutions as anchors in their communities, but our thinking on that's really evolving as we understand that that really there's an ecosystem of players involved when it comes to the food system and how people eat, what they're eating, where they're eating. And you've really demonstrated in so many ways the perfect example of why that thinking is so important and how change can be more effective in thinking about these kinds of relationships and opportunities and the way that we interconnect. So I really, really appreciate you coming and joining us today and sharing those stories. I also want to just call out Kathleen's comment in the chat. As you heard, as those of you who are on here heard, Kathleen's in charge of the single stop effort at Bunker Hill Community College. And she was saying that so many people told us how the food they received really helped them stretch their budgets and care for their families. And that's what it's all about. So thank you so much for sharing that, Kathleen. All right, we have a few questions now. Let's see. The first question is, this is for Molly. Would you be willing to share what your institution was quoted as a price for the Smart Choice software, so we know if it's within the price ranges to pursue? Molly, do you have some info on that you could share? This is from Skylar Imhoff.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually saw the question, so I wanted to go look it up to make sure I had the right answer for you. Yes. So the initial install and training and all of that sort of thing is around $2,000. And then monthly it is $495. So it is a little pricey. And I hope in the future they make it more accessible price-wise. But it is, as you saw, it's a really great tool to use. And if you have more specific questions about the software, the cost, all that sort of stuff, feel free to email me and I can connect you with my Smart Choice contact. Yeah.
Thanks, Molly. Skylar says she's at National Louis University in Chicago, Illinois. So we'll make sure you two connect after the webinar. And let's see, our next question is from Shastia Azule. I hope I'm saying that right. Do you have a warehouse location where you store the food you collect, or do your volunteers bring the surplus food directly to your partners? I think that's a question for you, Elise, which you sort of answered a little bit during the presentation, but I don't know if you want to add to that at all. And sure. Shastia, if that question, if I'm not getting that question right, feel free to add into the chat here or rephrase in the question section.
Sure. So we do both. We have our hub where we do bring food to store and resort sometimes, as well as we do direct deliveries from our food donors. I saw another question in the chat as well about us being, if we're the regional food bank. We are not a food bank. We're a food rescue organization, which is that kind of hybrid between. And so we're much smaller than our regional food bank. The Greater Boston Food Bank does like as much food a day as we do a year. It's amazing how much food that they move. But so we supplement that. We are a smaller scale, but we do this food rescue work that is harder to do on a large scale. In the grand scheme of things, we're really kind of in the medium range compared to some other agencies and organizations. But we do have some storage as well as doing some direct deliveries. And our building also lets us do things like repack bulk food that comes in from wholesalers so that we can redistribute that to agencies in portions that make sense for them.
I have to say I visited their Food Link Hub many times, and it is beautiful. It's so great. I remember because you've recently just moved in, right, during the pandemic. One of your staff, I think it was you who showed me around actually. But it was great, like the freezer space and the fridge space and the tables that you have where students or where volunteers can stand and help package things. They have a loading dock. Like it is just like the dream. So,
yeah, especially after years of we had shared space, we moved around. Last year we operated out of really, I think it was at the end of the day, there were 8 different locations that we stored food at some point in 2020. So it's a huge difference to have this dedicated space. And yeah, efficiencies like a loading dock that our vans and our truck can back up to, and the ability to pull pallets in and out of things, it makes a huge difference. It lets us do a lot more.
Thanks. I'm sure that efficiency is really important too. It's not just like a luxury or a nice to work in space, but it's something that really helps you get that food to people in as most timely a manner as possible, which, as you were saying, really is critical when you're dealing with sort of just in time food. Yeah. Okay, we have another question. This is from Susan Delandon. For FoodLink, do you not run into competition in seeking food donations with the regional food bank? It may be peculiar to our area, but our food bank actively seeks food donations that they term food rescue and also encourages individual pantries to seek food donations. And then we have a food rescue organization that is focused mostly on fresh from growers, but it seems to be a free-for-all with total disorganization and food available.
Yeah, this is a narrative that we've heard from other similar organizations in different parts of the country. We're really fortunate here in the greater Boston area that that there is actually a huge ecosystem of food rescue. We're far from the only food rescue organization. There's 2 others that are very similar to us, Love and Spoonfuls and Food for Free, that we closely coordinate with to share the different food potential donors in the area. We work in different geographical locations and with different kinds of scale. And the Greater Boston Food Bank works closely with all of us as well. They've determined that grocery store rescue doesn't work well for them. And so they're very happy to share that role with us. That is not true every place, and you'll see different structures similar to what Susan is noting. I'd be happy to chat with you more about that or connect you. There's a really wonderful international organization called Food Rescue Alliance that's based in Boulder, Colorado, that does that brings together organizations interested in food rescue and often is talking about exactly that topic.
Great, thank you. All right, just a couple more questions and just a few more minutes to get to them. So there's 2 questions about funding from Shasta and Susan. And the questions are for FoodLink, how you fund your organization, your hub, your transportation costs. Obviously, those can be high. You want to talk a little bit about the funding of the organization?
Sure can. So we fund through a variety of different models. We are a nonprofit. We work with, we have a variety of grants that help fund our work. We're often churning out grant applications. We have a fairly robust network of individual donors, and we also do have some government funding as well. So we, our hub was funded, the initial startup like purchase costs and a variety of different projects in our hub was funded by the Community Development Block Grant, which is through Housing and Urban Development. And we also get some state funding to help support our work in different communities and with kind of specific needs as well.
Thanks. Some of you may have seen that Molly's screen has gone dark. She's actually the single staff person at the pantry today. And so it's possible that she may have to jump off here and there in order to serve some needs. I'm not sure if, Elise, if you're able to answer this or Molly can answer this when she comes back, but I'm curious if, you know, obviously it's not just the students that face hunger and other needs. And And so curious if you know a little bit about efforts to also meet faculty and staff needs.
I know that there have been, I couldn't directly answer that. I see Molly's back, so she might have some info on that one.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
About addressing not just student needs, but also faculty and staff or others within the Bunker Hill community, that community college community.
Yeah, definitely. Looks like Kathleen answered that for us. Yeah, faculty and staff are definitely welcome to use the pantry, and we have several consistent users. It's definitely not as like as I guess common as students using it, but it is. We do have a few, and really a big part of our work too, and I'm sure Kathleen would agree with this, is education and advocacy around this issue specifically. And so a lot of the work we do is sharing resources that are, of course, open to the entire Boston community. We try to keep our food pantry to just currently enrolled students and current faculty and staff, just because we do have limited resources with our delivery spots and all that sort of stuff. But we also serve as like a resource center to distribute those nonprofits that are open to everyone and have a lot of different locations and things like that.
Thanks. I think that there's one more question about how those who are donating food decide what food to donate, what their motivations are, especially with like larger corporations like Trader Joe's. And along that, I'd like to also sort of ask both of you, because of course, Fine is really interested in seeing more local food get into our food system. And I think, Molly, you talked about the challenges of that. And just really curious if there are ways that you can envision getting, being able to sort of evolve again to bring more fresh foods and to bring more local, either produced or manufactured foods, even when it comes to the perishables, for example, into the work that you do. Molly, why don't we start with you and then we'll move over to Elise.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that's consistently on my mind, is how do we have more produce in the pantry and make it more accessible and more readily available. We do get consistent donations of produce, but again, it's just kind of difficult to keep up with making sure everything stays fresh and things like that. But now that we're moving more towards having students on campus, it would be amazing if we could bring back the mobile market. That's a program that's run through the Greater Boston Food Bank. And it's essentially a free farmers market. They set up in a space. It's usually either in a parking lot, or in our case, it's outside of our gym. And it's set up by the food bank, and anyone is welcome, can come through and get food. And a lot of it is fresh produce from the food bank. And that's a really great and effective way to get food directly to people that day, and make sure that it stays fresh in that time. So that would be something that I'd love to see come back to our campus. And then non-perishable local items are also something that I love to offer in the pantry. So we work with Seven Hills Pasta, which is a pasta company located in Melrose. So they donate lots of boxes of pasta to us pretty much every other month. And that's a really great way for us to kind of showcase a local business. And then, although Stop and Shop isn't necessarily local specific, I know of course they have stores in other states. They're a very kind of big name recognized store here in New England, in the Boston area. And so we have a lot of Stop and Shop brand names. And so I don't know if that, because it's not really considered local, but it has like that recognition, that name recognition, that it's like, a part of the community. So yep.
To address the first part of the question, how and why places donate, I mean, the why of specific foods is going to depend on a lot of things. Often it's something close to the code date or expiration date, something that maybe doesn't look as good. So it's up to the discretion often of the employees on what they put in the bin to donate. But why they donate is a variety of different reasons. A lot of places are interested in reducing their food waste for just because they care about it. But there's also here in Massachusetts an organics waste ban. So if you're producing more than 1 ton of organic material, just meaning not necessarily like organic grade or like organic certification, but like produce or flour material or something like that would also count. But if you're producing more than a ton, you are required to either dispose of it through anaerobic digestion, compost, or donation. And donation is free. So they have real good incentive to do it, which is great. I'm glad it happens. How we get more local is a really interesting question. We're lucky around here that there are the Boston area gleaners who work with farms to get donated farm produce. And they're doing a really great job, which is one of the reasons we don't glean is because it's a little bit more complicated, or it's a different kind of complicated than what we do. And they do it so well. So we receive food from the gleaners often. And that's one of the ways we get local produce into our agency's hands, or we help our agencies directly receive donations from the gleaners. But we're really interested in how we increase value-added products that are locally produced being in the emergency food system. And that's one of the things we're hoping to look more into as we've settled into our building, because in the past, what I've experienced is that our local producers, you know, the folks who are making value-added product, maybe non-perishable foods or other things, they don't necessarily have a ton of consistent waste. These small businesses are working on thin margins and they're being really economical. And so they might not have large amounts to donate regularly, but our new space lets us kind of work with that irregularity of donation. So if someone just has it once a month, or it's kind of an accident that it happens that they have a lot to donate, it's a lot easier for us to deal with that with our increased cold storage and dry storage. So we're looking at more ways there, but that's been a barrier in the past, is that they don't necessarily have the same kinds of waste that some other places have.
Well, we're coming up on the end of our hour here. So I do want to say thank you to Elise and to Molly and to all of you for joining us today. And to also just leave you with a couple of quick comments. I'd love for you, as I said, to fill out our survey. You'll get a link when you exit the webinar. And also I'd love for you to continue the conversation. There's a few ways that you can join us. There's the dining operators listserv. So if you're working at an institution as a dining operator or in sustainability or somehow connected with the dining operations, the listserv is a great place to share resources, ideas, ask questions, have peer-to-peer networking. And we also have a Facebook group for the Farm and City Campus Network on Facebook. So that group is active and we love to share through there too. And of course, if you have any ideas, we really welcome them. There is so much more we could unpack just with this conversation alone, but also more broadly around food security on campuses. So we welcome your ideas and feel free to email me or reach out. And Elise and Molly have also been very, very generous in sharing their contact info and are happy to connect with folks. Again, here's my contact info and we appreciate your feedback. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you'll join us on one of our upcoming webinars. We have 2 more coming up in this fall series. One will be on labor issues and the worker-driven social responsibility network, a great model for campuses and other institutions to learn about, and also on the USDA Agricultural Library, which is an incredible resource of information. We hope you'll join us for one of those. Stay tuned. And if you want to catch up on previous webinars, they are all on YouTube. So thank you again for joining us. And thank you to Elise and to Molly, to Sarah for helping manage the chat. And we really appreciate having you all with us today.